Hi, I'm Carly Shank, Assistant Director of Operations at the UIS Performing Arts Center at the University of Illinois Springfield. Earlier, I hosted discussions with our founding director, John Dale Kennedy, who served the university from 1980 to 2003 when he retired, and our longtime director who followed John, and that was Bob Vaughn, who served from 2006 until 2017. And today, I am pleased to sit down with our current director, Brian Reeves, who came to the university in 2017 and is with us here still. And we are going to discuss some of the more recent initiatives at the UIS Performing Arts Center and look to the future a little bit. And we are glad to be able to do this and mark some of this information as part of celebrating 40 years at Sangamon Auditorium, a milestone that has just been passed in the last few months. So thank you very much for sitting down with me today, Brian. We heard a little bit from the other directors about the career paths they were on that led them to the work here. And you have a largely similar but a little bit different career path. You're a different generation from those two men. So tell us a little bit about your career path before you got here.
Okay. Well, I would say I definitely got the theater bug in high school. Working behind the scenes, stage managing shows, and working the light systems and sound systems, things like that. So I knew I wanted to be in theater going into college. So I went to the University of Texas to study stage management. But in the first semester, I realized I really didn't enjoy the rehearsal process. I didn't enjoy I just didn't enjoy that process, let's just say that. But at the University of Texas, they have a very large performing arts center complex. And I was lucky enough to get a part-time job there working security for one semester. And then I moved up to the front office as the assistant to the associate director of grants and scheduling. And at my time there, I realized that a performing arts center environment really spoke to me because you could have a Broadway show one night, you could have a ballet the next night, you could have opera the next night, a symphony the next night. It was such a great variety without the rehearsal process.
I think I understand that a good deal from you, yes. Knowing you. Let's just get to the product, the end result. Get to the show.
Curtain up. But while I was there, I really realized that these are large businesses, and you really have to understand business in order to help the art that's on stage. So I decided to go to the University of Wisconsin and get a master's degree in business and arts administration. And while I was there, I was able to be the children's events coordinator at the Madison Civic Center, which no longer exists. It's now the Overture Center. But after that, I then went on to positions at the Leeds Center in Lincoln, Nebraska, then on to the Pioneer Center in Reno, Nevada. Then I received my first directorship of a building at Indiana University Auditorium in Bloomington, Indiana. Then after that was the first executive director of the Two Hill Center in St. Louis, just during their construction period. Then I became the director of the James H. Whiting Auditorium in Flint, Michigan. Then I became Chief Operating Officer of Michigan Opera Theater / Detroit Opera House. Then I went to Illinois to be the Director of Event Services for Southern Illinois University. Then I had a sort of a midlife crisis, and I thought, I don't ever want to do this again, and I decided to go on cruise ships. Did cruise ships for about a year and a half.
But you did this kind of work on cruise ships.
Yes, so. I did production management on the cruise ship. And then I realized I don't like cruise ships. And then actually one day I got a text message from Eric Thibodeau Thompson, who's a professor here in theater, and said, "Oh, Brian, by the way, do you realize that the position here at our university is opened up?" And I was like, "No, I had no idea." And so with minutes to spare before the deadline, I actually submitted my application, and here we are today.
Oh, something that I'm reminded of when you ran through your list of previous experiences is that you have been at some of the same venues that John Dale Kennedy and Bob Vaughn have been at. So there is really a significant overlap in this kind of work.
Bob Vaughn and I both worked at the Leeds Center in Lincoln, Nebraska at different times. And I believe we even shared the same office.
I think I've heard that.
And then John Dale Kennedy, of course, I knew him when he was here because I was the director of Indiana University Auditorium, so we were like sister organizations. But then when I applied for the position at the Two Hills Center, he was also a finalist. And after I left the Two Hills Center, they contacted him and he came in and also, did a couple of years there before he retired.
Sure. And, we laugh about your cruise ship work because he loves to bring it up, everybody.
It's such a goofy thing.
But that's a really different experience. And I mean, obviously it's all part of the same family of experiences to anybody not working in this field, but it's really different kind of work.
But I also want to say that early in my career, I was on a national tour with Sesame Street Live as the assistant company manager for 6 months. And then while I was on cruise ships, intermittently, I was also doing national tours as a company manager. It's like Hello Kitty Super Cute Friendship Festival.
Hello Kitty,
that
super cute.
Yeah. But so I really value that experience in my career because it lets me understand the touring productions, what their needs are as they're communicating with the Performing Arts Center or when they arrive, what their needs are.
Sure. Okay, so when you got here to UIS, one of the first things that happened in your tenure was the rebranding of our campus department and of our collective venues, the UIS Studio Theater and Sangamon Auditorium, as the UIS Performing Arts Center. So give us a little information about that change. How did it come about and what's important about it?
Sure. So the reason that came about was during the interview process, I had a one-on-one interview with the then Chancellor, Susan Cook, and her one question to me was, how do we get the community to really understand that Sangamon Auditorium is owned and operated by the university? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question, and the first thing I wanted to do was validate that that was a problem. So in my first months on the job, we did a large survey of everyone on the mailing list, and to my surprise, I found out about a third of the people responding to the survey did not know that Sangamon Auditorium was owned and operated by University of Illinois Springfield. So to solve that problem, so that was one problem that needed to be solved. The second was we actually had two venues. Everyone knows Sangamon Auditorium, but very few people know of the UIS Studio Theater, which is where we are right now for this interview. So we wanted to tie those two together so people could understand that great shows and events were happening in both locations. And so that naturally became the UIS Performing Arts Center, which speaks to the combined venues, but also still retains the Sangamon Auditorium name and the UIS Studio Theater name. And I would say for about the first year, we referred to it both ways, and now we just, if something's happening at Sangamon Auditorium, we basically say it's at the UIS Performing Arts Center, and if something's at the UIS Studio Theater, we say it's at the UIS Performing Arts Center in the intimate UIS Studio Theater to clarify it's in the smaller venue.
Sure. And Performing Arts Services, the department that we're now a part of, in my experience, that was just tough to say. I work for Sangamon Auditorium. Well, Sangamon Auditorium is a room, and it doesn't speak to the ways that we support the community and doesn't lend itself naturally into that kind of conversation. You have to sort of say, well, I know, it sounds like I work for a room, a building, and that's not really true.
Right. So when I started here, our department in the university was just called Sangamon Auditorium. And part of my job is looking towards the future, and I see an expanded future for our department where we can be doing more things. And this is also playing on what I did at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale was it used to be just Shryock Auditorium and Arena Promotions, and I rebranded that as SIU Event Services. So I kind of borrowed it here. But I feel it also helps the staff in the department understand that we're doing much more than just managing Sangamon Auditorium. So at the time of this interview, UIS Performing Arts Services manages the Performing Arts Center as a venue manager. We run our own Broadway series. We operate the UIS ticket office. We operate UIS Performing Arts Education Connections, which is our education outreach efforts. And then we also manage the Friends of UIS Performing Arts Center. And, more opportunities may come up in the future. But I think having this structure allows us the opportunity in the future, if something were to come our way, we can say, yes, we can do that because we're performing arts services, as opposed to saying, oh, that's not what we do. We're just Sangamon Auditorium.
Right. And while some of the current efforts are kind of small, our education department, for example, does do some programming off-site with teachers and with students. And so when we were always saying, oh, we're Sangamon Auditorium doing this, that doesn't feel as robust an explanation as something like a performing arts center that umbrellas all of these efforts together. So our new logo for the UIS Performing Arts Center includes some searchlights in the image. So tell us about that.
Okay, so the searchlights, I assume everybody knows, but there are 5 massive searchlights on the roof of the Public Affairs Center building, which is where the Performing Arts Center is located. And this is actually a repeat of something I did in Flint, Michigan, where I put 4 searchlights on their roof. So we had to be better than Flint, so we have 5.
I guess so.
But the searchlights really, people say, well, why did you spend the money? What's the purpose? It's twofold. One, it's part of what we call in the business audience engineering. So it's this idea that right when somebody pulls up to the building, the excitement is beginning. They can relax. They can leave their work worries or their, day-to-day worries behind. They're going to come be entertained tonight. So the searchlights sort of add that Hollywood premiere. There's excitement. Something special is happening that they're about to participate in. But really what the searchlights do is it's wayfinding. Mm-hmm. So we are on a college campus with a lot of buildings scattered about, and our parking lot isn't right next, to the Performing Arts Center. And when you think about how you go to any other performing arts center, you might drive up, realize, okay, this is the building that I want to be at, and then you find parking. You can't do that here. You can't drive up to our building. You have to just commit yourself to parking, and then you walk to the building. So by having the searchlights, as somebody's coming onto campus, if they're not familiar with campus, they can pretty much deduce that that concert or that Broadway show is happening in the building with the 5 searchlights on it, as opposed to the dark building, on the other side of campus.
Yeah, and this has been a challenge from the beginning. When I sat down with John Dale Kennedy and we talked about some of the challenges he faced when the building was opening, and the university was 7 miles from town, I think was some kind of quoted amount from the center of town, and it just felt like out on the edge of town, and nobody's really sure, and everybody in a community of this size wants to feel comfortable with knowing where they're going to park when they arrive. Is the signage correct to get them there? And we still struggle with all those things because we are on a fairly small campus of the University of Illinois, and yet that is what is front and center 9 to 5 Monday through Friday on this campus, and only when we have a Broadway show does it become a big showplace, not just Broadway, but any concert, a big showplace for the community driving out to the event. So it's a challenge to master all of those things together. Another physical change that as well as a business model change that you got on right away was building and operating our own concession stand in the lobby. And so I think a lot of patrons are probably very surprised that that hadn't happened years ago. And I can fill in some gaps here, but you can start by talking about what you found when you got here and the changes that you ultimately were able to implement.
Well, my first memory of the concessions issue at Sangamon Auditorium was during my interview session with the staff. And all of a sudden, several staff members were asking me, how do you feel about concessions? Should we be running our own concessions? And I was like, is this a trap question? Is there a right answer, wrong answer? What's going on here? But I think we should fill in the people that are watching this what it was. So when I got here, the university department in charge of food and beverage, food services, I think it's called, they would be asked to provide concession services. So paperwork would be filled out, sent over to that department, and they would come over. They would set up several folding tables, put some tablecloths on them, bring a whole bunch of beer or wine, and I think some sodas. I'm not even sure if they had sodas or if it was just beer or wine.
We did have sodas.
But no food products, nothing like that. And quite honestly, the service was, the people doing the service was they were fantastic. But they were not set up for high volume sales. In our environment, I would say they were set up like a wedding reception.
That's the way it's been described for years.
Yes, the wedding reception setup. Whereas, our intermission starts, we've got, 15 minutes to possibly serve 2,000 people that want a beverage or a snack. So I talked with them about this issue and what it would take to really create high volume service, and they didn't really want to get into that business. So we agreed that the Performing Arts Center, or Performing Arts Services, would take over concessions, which is fantastic because it is a moneymaker. We invested about $100,000 in a brand new concession stand specifically designed for high volume service. And now that investment has been paid back, and the net profits from running the concession stand run about $50,000 a year. And that's $50,000 that can now be used for other maintenance activities, renovation activities, and to help education outreach efforts and things like that. So every time somebody buys a popcorn or a beer or a glass of wine, remember, it's almost a donation to the Performing Arts Center.
Well, and one of the pieces about building the actual concession stand structure in the lobby is that I believe it was
phase 1.
6 months. Well, it is phase 1, but I believe it was only about 6 months prior to your arrival, or was it after your arrival, that the student union opened?
Oh, yes. So that was critical. So, no, I became the director designate in July of 2017. I became the director when Bob Vaughn retired October 1st of 2017. And the student union opened, I believe, in February of 2018.
Okay, so a little bit after.
So with the student union opening on campus, they now had a professional ballroom space and with a commercial kitchen right behind it. So now that became a location where all of these dinners and receptions could happen. Previously, the university was always having those dinners and receptions in the lobby. So to build a permanent concession stand
in the lobby of Sangamon Auditorium. Yes.
In building out that concession stand, that takes up a lot of square footage permanently, and that would have hindered the university from doing the dinners and receptions that they needed to do. However, the moment the student union opened up, the lobby of the Sangamon Auditorium was no longer needed for those type of events, and that allowed us to then, build out the concession stand. And I refer to the concession stand being phase 1 because before the concession stand was built, we contracted with a local architecture firm to conceptualize what a modern renovated lobby would look like. And so we have conceptual drawings ready to go. We just need somebody to fund it. But we have conceptual drawings ready to go that show the concession stand, that could show an upgraded coat check area, guest services area, and a brand new grand staircase going from the main lobby area up to the little landing above the box office. The main lobby is actually level 2. I don't want to confuse anybody. So going from level 2 to level 3, because right now that lobby space is completely unutilized because people don't know how to get there. And there's nothing there for them to visit or to do. So by adding the grand staircase, we'll then be able to move people up in that level. It's also going to help us with the inflow of people into Sangamon Auditorium, because then we can seat more people at the back of the loge level by using the grand staircase and all that. But we went ahead and built the concession stand because that was relatively low cost compared to everything else. It could be done as a standalone project, and we knew it was going to be a revenue generating item.
Another piece of that renovation, I don't think you mentioned, is that the way that patrons access the ticket office. Now, on an event night, doors are open. I think people who need the ticket office can find it relatively easy. But as a walk-up location, 10 to 5, Monday through Friday, it sort of feels like we're hiding access to the ticket office. And that's because there had always been a wall that was a showcase for the university. When there was no student union, and level 2 of the Public Affairs Center, the Sangamon Auditorium lobby, was the main showplace for the university. So with some of that activity moving and the university having a new showplace, not only can we look to these grand plans for the future, but we've also finally got banners that hang permanently in the lobby that just kind of generate the excitement of this is where events happen and you're in the right place to see a concert or to buy your concert tickets, et cetera.
Yes, so the banners, I love banners because they're big. I love big visual images. But the banners are not a new idea. You know, centers all around the country do banners. What was happening here before my arrival is the banners were mainly advertising the Broadway series. And with the advent of more commercial productions coming in, we really wanted people, as they're standing in the lobby, to real quickly see, wow, these are all the great shows that I can buy tickets to that are upcoming, as opposed to having to find a little brochure, you know, in a rack somewhere. And then as we started to sell out productions, we thought, oh, well, these sellout shows, that's kind of exciting. So we've started a sort of a wall of honor of sold out shows where we reprint the banner with those glorious words, sold out. And then that hangs up there as a great memory and a reminder to people, you got to buy your tickets early because it may sell out.
Yeah, well, this having some of those sellout shows kind of leads us into talking about a shift in the business model in terms of the timeline of presenting shows, our relationships with many more commercial promoters, which was a big change from the kind of announce a season and then not really add a whole lot of things onto it. So talk to us a little bit about that shift and how the department has benefited from that shift, as well as the community, really.
Okay. So, when I arrived at the university, Sangamon Auditorium was following a very traditional method of presenting shows, which is the then director, Bob Vaughn, and the directors before him would schedule an entire season of shows, usually from September through May. And they would have a lot of variety in there. They would have Broadway, they would have dance, they would have, pop music, classical music, recitals, whatever. And they would get all of those shows lined up. Then they would put them into one big brochure of, this is our whole season. And then the subscription process was fairly complicated. You can have the Broadway season, you can have the fine arts season, you can have the kitchen sink series, you can make your own season and all of this stuff. And that is still being done in a lot of performing arts centers today, but there's also a shift in some centers to be a little bit more flexible. And with the direction that I intended to take the university and the Performing Arts Center, it really necessitated leaving that model behind and going with a newer model, which is simply announcing shows throughout the season. And this actually, announcing shows throughout the season, and I started doing this, I want to say 2 or 3 buildings before, and it was hugely successful. I've always seen ticket sales skyrocket when you do that, so there is reason behind the madness, so to speak. But the number one thing is when you try to assemble an entire season in advance and then try to get all of that information into one brochure and then get it out the door, that puts a lot of work on the staff. Okay, that is a lot of work. So if there's a way to spread out that work over the year, that makes it much easier. So one, it helps in staff time. The second thing is if you announce the season all at once, you are now essentially telling the patron, you need to make your choice right now over all these events that you're going to attend, and you need to write us one very big check for all the shows you're going to attend. And people, when they start seeing, like, oh, I want to go to this show, 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 and then all of a sudden, oh, that's $1,000, they may start cutting back on the shows they want to see. Okay, but if in September we say, hey, we got 2 great shows we're announcing. Oh yeah, I want to see those 2. Here's a check. October, hey, there's 3 shows we're announcing. Hey, I want to see 2 of those. Let me write a check. Over the course of the year, the patron ends up usually spending more money, and that's how we see the ticket sales increasing. Also, when you announce your season all at once, you do sort of lock yourself in. And if you want to add a show mid-season, it's very difficult to get that information out to patrons because at their home, they've got your season brochure.
Right.
Oh, that show's not listed. It must not be happening. Whereas now people are trained to look at the email we send them on a weekly basis that lists all the upcoming shows. And if Jerry Seinfeld suddenly wants to come here, or we get Riverdance or some show that we're announcing, it just slides right in, and in future emails it's listed. So it's a much easier process.
And I mean, there are ways to continue to accomplish the single season, but it really is a major shift in the marketing model. That if we're only going to have a show, I mean, we announce them as soon as we can. But they get scheduled a little bit later. So now there's a finite amount of time. So whereas previously we would have had patrons who were picking up shows way early when they got their summer brochure, and we'd spend some money there to make sure they were aware of shows and buying the shows. Then we would spend a different pot of money as we got closer to the shows. Now it's just, here's the event that we've announced, and we're spending all the money in this time period to get people in the door.
Yes, and there's this may not be as relevant as it used to be, but remember, it used to be that the local newspaper was king. Mm-hmm. I'm talking before social media and before emails and all that. It was the newspaper, and if you announce your season, you got a great coverage in the local newspaper, and then they don't cover you anymore because that's old news. But if I can say, this week we're announcing Jerry Seinfeld, boom, newspaper says Jerry Seinfeld's coming to the Performing Arts Center. 2 weeks later, Riverdance, we're announcing Riverdance, newspaper, boom, Riverdance. So you continually get this press mentions in the media because you're constantly creating news.
Right.
And the biggest thing is, and I don't know if you want to get to this now, but the fact that we're doing more commercial events and using the more promoter model really requires us to announce and market shows that way.
Yes, I know that part of our business model is fairly invisible to the public, and that's fine. I think the promoters are fine with it as long as people buy tickets, and
as long as you buy tickets, you don't have to worry about how it works.
But this was something that those of us a little closer to the business model before your arrival would always kind of scratch our heads and go, yeah, we're not the ones doing the deals, but I don't even know how this would work within the university system of contracting and how we would make these events happen in really short order because there's a lengthy contracting process that we can't get out of. So yes, tell us how that all works.
Okay, so I'll get into some nitty-gritties of the contracting and the business. So if people want to skip ahead 15 minutes, now's the time to do it. But I guess it's good for us to just sort of record the history of how this happened.
I don't really think it's going to be 15 minutes, but we'll see.
Okay, let me get my, where to start? I feel like I'm teaching the course in Performing Arts Center management again. Okay, so there are really 4 ways that an event can happen at the Performing Arts Center. Okay, and each of these has a different name. So the first one is producing. If we were to produce a show, that would mean that we are deciding the show that's going to be done. We're hiring the director. We're hiring the choreographer. We're going to hire the actors. We're going to hire the musicians. And we are going to put a show on stage. So that is what the Muni Theater does here in town. They produce shows. And the Hoagland also produces some of their shows. Right now, at the time of this interview, we are not producing any shows. We hope to do that in the future, but that is not our business model right now. So that producing is one way that a show can happen on stage. The next way a show can happen on stage is a rental. And that is where somebody calls us up and says, hey, I would like to rent your stage on so-and-so date to do a show. And we rent them the facility. We sign a lease agreement with them. And they pay us a rental fee, and they get a bill for labor charges. They get a bill for front of house staff. It's very common when somebody rents the hall that we will help them with marketing, because we have an entire marketing department that knows how to, get the word out about an event. And so we will, give them a marketing bill if they want that service.
Well, and that kind of speaks to some of our rentals are local rentals and some of them are national rentals.
Yes. So let's say a national promoter of events that wants to rent our hall. Yeah, they don't want to figure out what the local newspaper is and the local radio station is. They're used to just contacting our marketing representative on our staff and saying, I want you to buy country music. I want you to buy the classical music station. They don't care what the call letters are of the station. They just know they want to spend $2,000 on the classical station. So we provide that service. Then, of course, we're also providing safety services. We make sure there are emergency medical technicians in attendance at the event in case any audience members have difficulty or have an emergency or anything like that.
And I think it's worth pointing out that rental doesn't mean that they sign a lease agreement and we all walk off the scene.
No.
Because I think some people might hear it that way. We're still providing services and we're just providing that promoter, that renter, a bill for those services.
And it's in our business, we still control major aspects of the event. So we control what is happening in the lobby in terms of how the person buys a ticket. We're controlling how the person is admitted, how their ticket is scanned. We are enforcing our own policies of the building. So to a patron, the fact that the event that's happening on stage is a rental event, they shouldn't even be aware of that. And the only concern that we really have is the quality of the event. We do get nervous sometimes if somebody wants to rent our venue, but we are wary as to the quality of the show that's going to be on stage. In that case, we really make sure that in the marketing, it's very clear that this is not a university-sanctioned event. This is so-and-so presents this event at the Performing Arts Center. But luckily, we have not had that problem yet.
Right.
Okay, so that's called renting. Then the third way of doing a show is presenting. Okay, so presenting is where a show already exists somewhere in the country or in the world that can tour to our location. So for example, Riverdance, any Broadway touring show, any major comedian, musician, or whatever can bring their show to us. And when we present a show, we contact the show's agent, their booking agent, and we say, hey, we're interested in Riverdance. When can Riverdance come to Springfield, Illinois? And the agent will say, Riverdance, actually we're going to be in Chicago September 25th. We could play you on September 26th, which is great because on the 27th, we're going to St. Louis. You're right in the route. And we say, great. And then we work out a financial deal with the agent. And then we have a contract to do the show. We know the show is going to show up. And we put the tickets on sale. We are obligated to market the show according to that show's marketing standards. So any marketing that we do has to be approved by the show in terms of the graphics that were used, how we're describing the show, things like that.
And even within presenting, not to split too many hairs, but there can be different financial arrangements.
Yes.
We always have a stake in anything we're presenting about what kind of revenue we're going to bring in on the ticket sales. Sometimes we share that stake with the show that we're presenting. And then other times we just write the show a check and we do whatever we need to do to sell the tickets to the show.
So talking about that subgenre of the contracting, there's the guarantee, which means we are guaranteeing that we are going to pay a certain amount of money to the act for showing up. and doing their show. Then there can be what's known as a back end where the artist says, well, I'll show up for $60,000, but I also want 70% of your profits from the show. And so in that case, we show them all of our expenses to do the show, our marketing expenses, our labor expenses, and we get to retain that from the ticket sales, but anything that's left over, we split 70-30 or whatever percentage point was negotiated. And then there can be other derivatives of that. There can be it's called next monies, like, okay, we'll give you the first 50,000, we'll keep the next 20,000, we'll give you the next 10,000, then we'll split, the next monies, and then it can just get as creative as you want from there.
All right, so then number 4.
Okay, so number 4, and this is...
Here's the meat.
Yes, and this is the game changer that we brought with my arrival, and we really started doing this in 2018, and that is called the co-promotion. Okay, so a co-promotion is a derivative of a renter. So there are commercial promoters out there that just speculate on the fact that a show will make money or a tour will make money. So they will get with the show or the show's agent and they say, hey, I want to book Riverdance. I don't own a venue, but I'm going to rent a venue. And in fact, I'm not just going to do Riverdance once. I want to book Riverdance 15 times, and I'm going to book them into 15 venues around the country. So Riverdance, you give me a good deal for 15 shows. Okay, so there's a little cost savings there. Mm-hmm. Now, now that promoter has the Riverdance show and they want to play venue. So we say, well, hey, we'd love to have Riverdance play at our hall, and we want that business of you renting the facility. So I tell you what, we'll be business partners and we will co-present the show with you. So legally on paper, it's a rental, but they are not paying us a set rental fee. What we're doing usually is we are just splitting the profits 50-50. So,
and of course, the rental is not to Riverdance. The rental is to this promoter.
Right.
In between.
So the university has no legal contract or obligation to the show. Our obligation is to the promoter as a facility renter. And the financial terms of that renter are basically that we are going to be financial partners and we're going to split the profits or split the loss. Mm-hmm. So we are taking a risk here. And then the promoter, they have a legal liability to the show because they've booked the show. Now, where that helps us is one, we have 3 or 4 commercial partners we work with that are going out there and bringing us the hottest shows. Because they can contact an agent and get the agent's attention because they're going to book that person 15 times around the country, whereas we are just once. Second, because we're in a university environment, there's a lot of bureaucracy that we have to deal with on our own. So whenever we do a contract, that's got to go through the legal review process. That has to go through the purchasing department, has to go through the accounts payable department, and all those things. But when somebody's renting the hall, we're in charge of the contract. We have a boilerplate contract. We say, no, this is it. You can't change it. Sign here, boom, we're done. Mm-hmm. And because that's a boilerplate contract that's already been vetted by the university lawyers, if somebody wants to rent the hall, we can rent the hall and turn around the paperwork in 24 hours. That's unheard of in a university environment. But it gives us a strategic business advantage because now that promoter is saying, well, let's see, I can go to University of Illinois Springfield and have this deal done in a phone call in 24 hours, or I can go to this state university in Ohio and it's going to take me 4 months to do a contract. So we have that benefit there. When we present a show, meaning we go to the agent, we say, hey, we want to book Riverdance directly. Well, now Riverdance is going to give us their contract.
Right.
Okay. And now our legal counsel has to review it, purchasing has to review it, a lot of markups, a lot of changes, and that takes weeks and weeks. So in terms of the streamlining the process, much easier for us to deal with a promoter and enter into a financial agreement with them to split the proceeds, because that paperwork is done almost instantaneously. So, and we get better. So less staff work, quicker processing, more exciting shows, more of the shows that people want to see. And they're telling us that by the way that they're buying tickets, which means more revenue to the Performing Arts Center, which means more money to do routine maintenance and facility upgrades and education outreach efforts and things like that.
And, you know, the business continues to evolve, and it still hasn't evolved to the point where it makes sense for Broadway shows to be booked through a co-promoter, because it is still a business. And you look at the financials, and we have a record of presenting Broadway. And so that is the piece that we still follow a more traditional model of announcing a Broadway season, putting those shows on sale, getting subscribers, because then you're dealing with like kind of events. And, you know, not every Broadway buyer wants to see every Broadway show, but a good percentage of them are interested in 4 out of 6 Broadway shows that we may announce. And so that's something that we still present in-house, that if you look back, you know, that's what was happening under Bob Vaughn previously.
Yes, and very, very few places actually outsource their Broadway series, unless you're in a major market and and it's been turned over to, like, you know, Broadway Across America. This Sangamon Auditorium had that for a year or two.
It was at least a couple.
At least a couple of years, but quickly left that model. And the reason we have no interest in outsourcing the Broadway booking is because, we know how to do that business. It's very risk-free. I don't say risk-free, but it's very minimal risk. And by doing 5 or 6 Broadway show titles, you're always going to hopefully, you know, make money. So there's no reason to split the money with somebody else. And there was another. The other reason why. So Broadway can be on a series because since we're presenting the show, we are setting the ticket prices. And we can set the ticket prices to be the same across all the Broadway shows to make a subscription process easy. We cannot create subscriptions for all the other shows because there are multiple promoters bringing their events here. They have different ticket prices. They have different price breaks in the hall. You know, it may not just be the orchestra section. They may say the orchestra and half the loge is one price. So there's no way that we could coordinate all that to be a subscription series. And usually a subscriber wants a discount and no promoter wants to discount, you know, their shows.
Sure. Sure. Wow, we really did talk about that for 15 minutes.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, so on to a few other things that have happened in your tenure.
It's like, but wait, there's more.
There is. So when you were hired, there had recently been an accident in Sangamon Auditorium, and the university was looking pretty hard at safety. So talk about the kind of safety practices and policies that you have implemented in your time.
You're right. So when I got here, because of a major accident, as you would expect, outside consultants were brought in to really detail every little, thing that, could be improved upon. And I would say the vast majority of them were, almost all of them, were not immediate dangers. They were just like, hey, you should look at this, you should look at that. So we have really, during my tenure, made safety as job one. And we're constantly going around and, we a lot of people don't realize this, but we do a safety walk once a month with you and your position, me as director, and our production team. We will walk the entire Performing Arts Center. I mean, from all the way the very top to the bottom, just looking for anything that might have occurred since the last safety walk. Mm-hmm. Always looking at how can we make this just even a little bit more safe? Should we put a sign in this area warning of a potential hazard?
With the understanding, of course, that everything stops if we find something that is truly dangerous.
Yeah, if something is an immediate danger to anybody, obviously that's put out of service and it's an immediate fix. But we're also looking at what are the things that if this item were to break or not be properly maintained would put us out of business. So for example, I'll give you a couple of examples. The motors that raise and lower the orchestra shell ceiling. If that motor were to break and the orchestra ceiling unit were hanging just 10 feet off the ground, we couldn't do a Broadway show the next day. I mean, that thing weighs several tons and has to get out of the way. So that's the problem. If our orchestra pit lift suddenly stops, 20 feet below stage level and it's needed for the next show, that puts us out of business. But there are even other things like it's backstage is a really complicated environment, and very often the people that are working there, that is their one and only time that day that they're in that environment. If they're a touring artist or a touring crew member, or even if they're one of our on-call stage crew members, they may only work backstage a few times a year. So we take extra effort to clearly label exit routes because I tell you what, if you're in some part of these buildings and the fire alarm goes off, you don't want to be confused as to which door is the exit and left and right. And
this building is pretty confusing.
Very confusing, yes. But we're looking at that. We are constantly looking, like for example, in this entire building, the fire alarm system is being replaced as we're having this interview. I'm trying to think, can you remind me if there's anything in particular you can think of?
Well, we've just really raised the bar on making sure that we are documenting when inspections happen of some of our safety systems.
Yes.
Policy changes related to PPE.
In the years prior, basically all stage crew members were just considered stage crew. And we actually created a subset of that called the rigger. And the rigger is a person who is responsible for hanging the loads above people's heads. So when you see chain motors lifting up, grids of lights and things like that, that's a rigger has arranged that. So we created that subcategory of employee position description, and now those people have to go through trainings. We bring in specialists from Chicago and it's like a 2 or 3 day training session, and they get a certificate that they have been trained, as a rigger. So we wanted to make sure that we had that safety aspect happening. Also, for some events we had a doctor or a registered nurse standing by in case there was a problem. I have since mandated that we have 2 emergency medical technicians from the Springfield Fire Department here standing by anytime there's an event in Sagamana Auditorium. Because unfortunately, if somebody does have a heart attack, has a stroke, has some sort of medical condition, it can take just a few more minutes longer for emergency medical personnel to respond to our location. And it's especially important to have medical staff standing by, because as people are driving onto campus or leaving campus, that clogs the streets, making it, again, more difficult for an ambulance or a fire truck to get through. And a lot of people aren't aware of this, but if you're attending an event at the Performing Arts Center and you're not feeling well, or you tripped and hurt your ankle, or gee, my heart doesn't feel good or whatever, it's a free checkup. Just notify any usher, and within a minute, a Springfield fireman paramedic will be there, and they are already activated with the EMS system. So if they feel that they need to hook you up to an EKG machine, that EKG machine, that's actually sending telemetry to the local hospital, and a doctor is reviewing that right there while you're still here at the Performing Arts Center. So if you need any medical attention, please let us know. We'll help you out right away.
Shifting gears,
yes.
Let's talk about this space that we're in right now. This is the UIS Studio Theater.
I love this space.
And it has undergone a significant amount of renovation on the audience side, primarily, in your tenure, after your careful examination of its use and what its potential was. So because of the timing of the renovation, not a lot of our audiences, as of this interview, have seen it. It was mostly completed by fall of 2019, and we were just starting to imagine the uses of the space. Tell us about that grant from the President's Office and how that came about.
Okay, so I think we need to start off by saying that the UIS Studio Theater, before this renovation, utilized some massive telescoping seating risers that in theory were mobile. And I say in theory because it took a whole bunch of people.
They were heavy and they're noisy when you walk on them.
Yes, and the wheels were busted off and there was a lot of cuss words every time. These things had to be moved around. So, and when they were configured, it was like, yes, you could have seating that could be reconfigured, but no matter how you configured it, the seating was awful. There was no leg room.
There was no leg room.
You walked up and down the risers, and they were like a boomba, 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 boomba. And there was a balcony section that had seats that had even worse leg room. And there's that in the producers. There's that line: "I invented theater in the square. Nobody had a good seat." That's basically what the studio theater was. It was theater in the square where nobody had a good seat.
Well, and we've heard in these interviews about like how that came to be, this room, and what it was imagined for, and what it was used for in the first few years were not one and the same.
Right.
And so, it was a long time coming.
And Bob Vaughn did a wonderful kitchen sink series of events in here, which was small bands that made sense for a crowd of anywhere from 50 to 300 people. But there was no defined stage area because again, the room was so flexible, and it just. Going back to what I talked about at the very beginning of this talk, the audience engineering. You want the audience to feel good about their environment, and we had wonderful performers and a terrible environment for the audience. So, about a year and a half into my tenure here, we got word from the University of Illinois President's Office that they were offering grants to the campuses of up to $200,000 in support of the arts. And I was like, hello, free money. So we filled out a requisition.
And I remember reading the first few paragraphs about the arts and humanities are important, blah, 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 blah. And then getting to the line that said, for example, you might want to use this money to renovate an existing space.
I was like, heck yes, heck yes. So when you get a memo from the President's Office saying, hey, you could have $200,000 if you can renovate a performance space, I was like, yes. Okay, so we wrote up our proposal. Unfortunately, we only got $150,000, but thanks to the Friends of UIS Performing Arts Center, which is our donor base, we had been saving up some of those donations. So we were able to take about $100,000 from Friends donations and combine it with $150,000 from the President's grant. And for $250,000, we really got a wonderful, what is known as a black box theater. So I'm not sure. I know the cameras can't pan the whole room, but actually maybe on the center camera, one of the side cameras, can the folks in the booth maybe show the seating area? Great. So what we have is we have black curtains now, floor to ceiling, surrounding the space, and the reason for that is to focus the audience on the performer. That's where the focus would be. Before, there were no curtains, and you could just see the back walls. You could see the balcony rails. Mm-hmm. And
it was purple.
Oh, yes. The room was like mauve. Or dusty rose. So it was just these colors everywhere. The floor of the theater was like a linoleum.
Bob Vaughn always described it as battleship linoleum.
Battleship linoleum, but it was a tan color. So there was just a lot going on in the room.
And light bounced off it, which is just terrible for a lighting designer.
Yes.
And of course, this was the home of UIS Theater producing their shows.
Yes.
And it was clearly just not a theater kind of space.
Right. And that was important because this is the home of UIS Theater. We had to make sure the space was still flexible, because what's wonderful about UIS Theater is they really experiment with their shows. Some shows they'll do with the audience surrounding the performer. Some they'll do on a thrust stage. Some they'll do in a proscenium stage, or they'll do on an angle or two sides. So we wanted to retain that flexibility. So what we ended up doing was floor-to-ceiling black curtains. We painted the floor black.
Got rid of the linoleum.
This is actually, it's an eighth of an inch of a wood on top of the linoleum is still there. It's a dirty secret, but it's underneath. There's an eighth. No, we scraped it up. You're right. We scraped up the linoleum. See, this is why we need to do these talks, so I remember. We scraped up the linoleum. We added an eighth inch of what we call sacrificial wood that can get damaged. We'll just replace it in a few years, and painted it black. Boom. So now we have a black environment to where the performer is what shines in the space. Then we created, we knew that we didn't want to go back to those telescoping seating risers, so we have used what's known as Wenger platforms, and these are individual 4x8 platforms that you can vary in the height. And by using those platforms, we created six rows of seats that match up to the old balcony level. That becomes the seventh row.
Yep.
Right. And these risers are specifically, we paid extra, so they have sound deadening material in them. So it's not thunk, thunk, thunk as you're walking up them. It's like quiet, 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 quiet. We got wonderful seats that they're stackable, which is important because the risers and the seats can all leave this room. So we can take down the curtains, we can remove all the seats, we can remove the risers in one day and have a completely empty space for, let's say, a banquet or some sort of gathering. But the seats are much wider than they were before. There's
lots of leg room.
There's much more leg room. So even me, I'm 6'3", I can sit comfortably and somebody can walk in front of me to get to their seat. There's absolutely no sightline obstructions. We've eliminated all of that. And
so with all of that, the capacity has lowered.
Right. So that's the take. So it used to be 350, what I call terrible seats,
right,
to 124 wonderful seats. Now that means our ability to make profit in this space is really cut out, because we halved our attendance. But the idea is to use this space not to generate the money that's needed to run the Performing Arts Center, which is often what we have to do on the main stage, but this is the space for the community to use. We really want to see new theater companies being formed that will use this space. It's a very low-cost space to use. We want to have, things like this where we have discussions about the arts. We have pre-show talks, post-show talks. Really just, we want students to use the space. We want the music students to use it. We want the theater students to use it. So I'm really excited about the potential of this space for sure.
Well, and mentioning doing this gets us into, we hope as of this filming, here we are in early June 2021, and
but this is before COVID too, right? This was back in the day. I shouldn't have said that, right?
You shouldn't have said that.
That's going to come true. Okay.
So we are looking forward to reopening to full capacity post COVID-19 world pandemic. But this has really been our space for the last 12 months. As soon as a little more was known about the pandemic and we got to summer 2020 and our production staff came back to work, and of course from home we'd been monitoring what was happening and what our like venues around the country were doing, and we moved streaming equipment into this space so that we could use this space and talk a little bit about how we've spent this time of the pandemic in terms of our department and use of resources and looking to the future.
So assuming that somebody might be watching this, 10 years from now, just to set the stage again like you were doing, in March of 2020, we were about to do a performance by comedian Ron White. I can't remember the exact date. It might have been the 15th or 17th.
It was the 12th of March.
12th of March. And that show was scheduled to begin at 7:30 p.m. and at 5:15 or 5:20 p.m. I was in the chancellor's office suite with the head of community relations and some other people, and we were just confirming that the governor of the state of Illinois had just minutes before in a press conference declared that no events
Over
more
a
than
thousand
over
people.
1,000 people could occur in the state effective immediately. And we had about 1,600 people, coming that night. So immediately we gathered the staff, and I think it was at 5:40, we told all the staff, this event is not happening. Ticket office, start emailing and phoning patrons. We had a staff member calling local restaurants.
We had some volunteers who were already coming on campus.
Yes.
Some of them volunteered to help put up signs and run out to parking lots and stop
Yes.
patrons from getting out of their cars.
The volunteers were wonderful. They did. They went to the parking lots, and as people drove up in their car, they were like, nope. They explained the situation. Patrons didn't even have to get out of their cars. I mean, we were so fortunate. I don't think
You called restaurants.
Oh yeah,
to say-
we called restaurants and say, hey, make an announcement. Anyone that's there with Ron White tickets, just enjoy their dessert and have another cocktail because they ain't coming here. And then I actually went on Ron White's bus, and me and the promoter Don Kromberg with Nightlight Entertainment, and we were on the bus with Ron White. We said, "We're sorry, Ron, your show's not going to happen." And so he told his driver, "Okay, let's go." And his tour bus, drove away. And then actually, Don Kromberg and I sat on stage center, and we each had a beer at 7:30 in front of an empty house. But so that was in March of 2020. So around end of July, we realized that we were in this for the long term, because when we stopped operations.
Oh, it was.
Because I remember we had a full staff meeting the Monday after the Ron White, and this was before. This was when the university was declaring everybody go home. The university's shutting down. We don't know what's going on.
The state didn't shut everything down until Tuesday the 17th because it was a local election day. So they kept everything going so that people could vote on the 17th. So we were all in the office on Monday the 16th. And
knowing that was our last day in the office. And to put it into perspective, how we didn't know what was going on, we went around the table and asked everybody to give their prediction of how long this would last. And most people were saying a month, 2 months.
End of the school year.
Yeah, and I think, I was like, through the summer. Through the summer was absolute pessimism. Nobody in March 2020 was thinking that we would still have some sort of social distancing, masking, remote.
All our kids came home from school,
June
and
of
they
2021.
never thought that they weren't going to go back to school when that grade level.
Okay, so come July, we realize, oh my gosh, we're in it for the long term. How do we stay relevant as a performing arts center? And so I literally started getting on Google and Googling live streaming and thinking, okay, I'm 54 years old, back then I was 53 years old, I was a young guy back then. But I was thinking, how does live streaming work? What equipment do we need? I had no idea. So I was looking at YouTube videos, and I was, looking at, what things do we need to keep in mind? And then I figured out, okay, this is how it works. And I even downloaded the software. It's called OBS, is what we're using right now. And, I played with it a little bit, and I thought, wow, this is actually easy. This isn't complex. So I got with the production team, got with Craig Norman, who's a production manager, and said, hey, I think we can do this. Let's start, buying equipment. So we set a budget for $12,000, which quickly became $15,000, which became $20,000. That's when I stopped listening. I think we were just spent $20,000. But because of that expenditure, we were able to create a 4-camera system permanent for the studio theater. 1 camera is fixed, 3 are movable on tripods. We got a lot of new equipment in the tech booth to be able to manipulate the cameras, to do camera switching, to combine all of the cameras plus text overlays and videos and whatever. And then to be able to send that out live streaming, either on our website or through Facebook or somebody else's Facebook if they want to tap into the stream. And because of that ability, we were able to stay relevant, especially with our education connections operations. And, you supervise the education connections, so I'd love for you to just, for the record, describe a few things that we did here that were wonderful.
While live events had to stop, and you had so many artists offering their live content, the same artists that we would have booked. You could suddenly stream Broadway shows and pay for that on your own. So it didn't necessarily feel like we needed to be a conduit for that to give our audiences that kind of programming. But education hadn't stopped, and students were still meeting virtually, or in some cases, as the year went on, hybrid, in person. And so education had to continue. And so we streamed some live performances that would have previously been a part of our Class X series, and added a component that was interactive to it. So that was part of the stream, that you could learn the chicken dance from Dancers with the Springfield Ballet Company, or do some drama activities with me after Anne of Green Gables. And we were able to bring young artists in a socially distanced context to record, and then we would stream piano recitals, and a solo competition, solo contest for our Springfield Public Schools that we work with closely. UIS Music continued to have events that were streamed, both faculty recitals of all kinds of instrumentation and such, as well as some student events that we would both record and do live. Those were fun. We had some experiences where we would play a live recording, and then a clarinet player would be right here, and we'd go right from the recording to the live clarinet player, so that we could really keep the experience of performing alive for young performers on campus and in the community. And so we were always trying to be creative, and we'll continue to try to be creative about how we use this equipment and how we use this space in that way. And
we learned so much, and I have to say incredible kudos to the entire production team, because this was all new technology to them. And we were, those first few broadcasts, we were figuring things out like, you have to color balance the cameras, or the lighting for broadcast is totally a different technique than lighting for live audience. And for me, the things that really worked the best were like the students, like the young students that would come in and do a piano recital or something, because we were giving them the opportunity to perform in the Performing Arts Center, which I think is always a thrill for anybody, especially a younger kid. We were also letting them have a recording of their event, but also by live streaming it, their grandmother, their grandfather, aunt and uncle across the country could share in that moment. Okay. But I think we also learned that, we're not in the business of television. And so, my prediction for the future is that this is not going to be something where we produce plays specifically to broadcast, because at that point we're creating television, and that's not what we're about. We're about creating that live performance with a live audience. And you're a performer. I think that there's a total difference between having a live audience and just talking to a
and you
camera.
said it before, but I just want to go back to the production staff learning a completely different set of skills. Yes, they deal with the lighting and sound equipment in this room for live events, and we still had to use that equipment for the streamed events. But then there's this whole other bank of equipment that they had to learn how to use, and it effectively became a television studio. And you're right, we are not a television studio.
But we also learned about broadcast rights. Hopefully in the future, people will watch this recording and laugh, that it used to be this way. But because of the pandemic and all of a sudden everybody having to live stream, everybody was running into this issue of the copyrights. And basically it has to do with, like, if you were going to play the piano right now, the person who wrote that composition, if they're still alive, probably still owns the copyright for that piece. And we had to get through the university lawyers, but apparently we can live stream your performance in real time, just as if it was in front of a live audience because you are doing the performance. However, we cannot record your performance and offer it on our website for future viewing because we've created at that point a master recording, which is a different set of rights that the university does not have. We have blanket rights with a lot of rights issuing agencies to cover anybody, if I were to sing happy birthday, we're covered. But if you were to record me singing happy birthday, we would have to, basically cut this out of this interview because, people in the future couldn't watch it. So hopefully the rights agencies will combine those sort of rights so that live streaming could happen.
And as we think to the future about live streaming, it all remains to be seen what the public's expectation for live streaming will be. Will they expect now that every time your nephew 5 states over graduates from high school that, oh, well, of course, that'll be live streamed. And so though I can't make it that weekend, I can watch it live? Right. I don't know if that will be the expectation.
Well, we're going to be purchasing the equipment necessary to allow live streaming in Sangamon Auditorium. But again, the only shows that would be live streamed would be things like graduations, commencements, maybe a dance recital. It has to be something where music is not being performed where we might get into a copyright violation.
Sure.
But it's definitely, we're never going to live stream, a Broadway show. We're never going to live stream, the Beach Boys concert or anything like that. That will never happen.
So as kind of a closure to our interview this afternoon, we have been asked so many times throughout the last year and a half to just look into the crystal ball and what do we think will happen? When will we reopen? How will audiences be when we return? And of course, these interviews have been all about the past and leading up through the present of this organization. And what does the future hold for us? Oh, holder of the crystal ball.
Holder of the crystal ball. Well, I am predicting that everything will be A-okay because it has to be. I hope it is. Come this September of 2021, we've got a lot of shows that are planned. We're starting to announce those shows, and people are buying tickets. And our business is continuing on a growth cycle. We are getting more promoters contacting us, asking to co-promote events. The promoters that we have are bringing us more events. People are we haven't reached the maximum saturation yet in the market of people buying tickets. So I think financially we're on a great trajectory there. On the flip side, the university itself right now is having financial difficulties because of we went through the Trump administration where a lot of restrictions were placed on immigration and people getting visas to become a student. And this university relied heavily on the foreign student population. So because of that, student tuition revenue is down. And right now, 17% of our budget is from university allocation of what's known as state dollars. So my prediction is over time, that allocation is going to go down as our department is able to cover our own costs by renting the hall, doing co-promotions, selling beer and wine at the concession stand and things like that. So for me, the future is a department that is self-sustaining financially, that does not need university dollars for routine business. We're always going to need university support, possibly for a major maintenance issue or a major renovation. In terms of changes in the auditorium, I think in the next few years, we're definitely going to be looking at replacing all of the seats in the auditorium. That's the number one negative issue we hear from patrons is the comfort of the seats and the narrowness of the seats. So we've got to do that. I also feel that one of the things I want to champion as director in the upcoming years is we have this vision for a renovated lobby. That's probably a $3 to $5 million project, so we have to do some serious fundraising. I want to get us in a position to be able to do that project because we are the front door of the university. Right now, we have about 75,000 people a year from the community pass through our doors, and what they see in the lobby is helping to form their impression of the university as a whole. And so we really want that lobby to look, world class. And then, nice slow expansion of the number of staff on board. And
well, you speak a lot too about, how many use days do we have in these spaces? And I was just working with our fall calendar this morning, and that's really increasing. And as that continues to increase, our staffing will increase. And promoters will know when we have oversaturated, and I hope we never do, what events, we can't have a 7-day week and have 5 country music acts in that week, because the Springfield market just won't bear that. But there are a lot of other events that can happen in these spaces, and we will just continue to increase the resources as we need to, staff and otherwise, in order to make all the events that the community can handle happen in these spaces. So I look forward to seeing what that's going to be like.
And also right now we're in the process of, we're about to review applications for a brand new position called Director of Development. And this full-time staff person is going to be crucial to our success in future years as we look towards attracting major donors and building the existing donor base that we have so we can do the major projects like the lobby renovation.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me and providing this record of where we are here in early June 2021.
And if I can go on the record, if the camera can zoom in on me here, Carly Shank is one of the best people I've ever worked with. She is phenomenal. I want this to be on the record for the Performing Arts Center for years to come. Carly Shank was fantastic. And I heard a woo from the technicians. They agree.
Well, I've enjoyed all of my work here. This is not and now we're done with you, Carly. No. I'll be here for sure. So thank you very much, Brian.
Well, thank you.